The workplace does not reward talent as much as people think it does. It rewards clarity. And that is where a lot of talented people quietly lose. You can be smart, you can be creative, you can have great ideas, you can be the most capable person in the room, but if people constantly have to decode you or chase you for updates, clean up your handoffs, or guess what you're prioritizing, your talent starts to lose value. That may sound harsh, but it's true. And in most workplaces, the person who is clear becomes easier to trust. And the person who's easier to trust usually gets more responsibility and opportunity for growth. This is one of the biggest things people misunderstand about work. They think performance is only about ability. It's not. Performance is also about how easy you make it for other people to work with you. Can your manager understand what you're doing? Can your team understand what you need? Can people tell what's done, what's stuck, what's waiting, and what actually matters? Because if they can't, your talent becomes expensive. Not expensive in salary, but expensive in time. Someone has to follow up, has to clarify, has to redo the work. Someone has to sit in another meeting because the first conversation didn't actually land. That is where clarity wins. And this is not just a soft workplace opinion. A company by the name of Gallup, they did a study that found 46% of US employees clearly know what is expected of them at work. That means over half of the employees are operating with some level of confusion around expectations. That is wild. And when expectations are unclear, what usually happens? People fill in the blanks for themselves. One employee thinks the priority is speed. Another thinks the priority is quality. Another thinks the priority is keeping leadership happy. Another thinks priority is avoiding mistakes. Now, everyone is technically working, but they're not aligned. That is how workplaces will end up busy, but not effective. From an HR perspective, this shows up everywhere. It shows up in performance issues. A manager says they're not meeting expectations. Then you ask, what expectations? And suddenly it gets vague. It shows up in employee relations. An employee says, well, nobody told me that. And sometimes they're right. And it shows up in turnover. People don't always leave the job because it is hard. Sometimes they leave because the job is unclear. Expectations were not thoroughly set. They don't know what winning looks like. They don't know where they stand. They don't know what matters most. So eventually they just disengage. And Gallup's broader engagement research backs up why this matters. Their research across millions of workers and hundreds of thousands of teams shows that highly engaged teams perform better across productivity, profitability, absenteeism, turnover, and safety. Clarity is not everything, but it is one of the foundations because people cannot perform well in a fog. And for employees, this is where you can separate yourself, not by trying to sound the smartest, by becoming clear. When you send an update, make it clear. Here's what's done, here's what's pending, here's what I need, here's the risk, and here's the next step. That sounds basic, but sometimes basic wins. A lot of people send noise and call it communication. They give long explanations, but no conclusion. They raise problems, but no recommendation. They attend meetings, but leave with no ownership. They say, I'm working on it, but it has never been defined. And this is where talented people get passed over. It's not because they lack ability, but because the leadership does not feel confident handing them more complexity. Because more responsibility usually means more ambiguity. And if you can't bring clarity to small things, people won't trust you with big things. For managers, the message is just as important. If your team is confused, it's usually not a talent problem. Sometimes it is a leadership problem. You cannot hold people accountable to expectations that you never made clear. You cannot say, use better judgment when you never explained what good judgment in this role will look like. You cannot say, be proactive every time someone makes a decision and then you punish them for not reading your mind. Clarity has to become before accountability, not instead of accountability, just before it. Because once expectations are clear, accountability becomes a lot cleaner. This is not personal. It is not emotional. It is not vague. It becomes, here was the expectation. Here's what happened. Here's the gap. Here's where it needs to change. A real issue is that a lot of workplaces confuse motion with progress. Everyone is busy. Everyone is answering emails. Everyone is in meetings. Everyone is reacting. But nobody is clear on the actual priorities. Asana's workplace research has described how workers spend a large portion of their time on work about work, things like chasing updates, unnecessary meetings, switching tools, and trying to find information. Their research also found that the lack of clarity around goals and responsibilities is one reason people end up working late. That is the hidden cost. Unclear work creates more work. Clarity removes friction, and the people who remove friction become valuable fast. So yes, talent matters, but talent without clarity becomes chaos. The person who is clear gets trusted. The person who is trusted gets responsibility. The person who gets responsibility gets opportunity. It's how it usually works. Not always fairly, not always perfectly, but often enough that people should pay attention to this. So if you want to grow at work, don't just ask, am I good at my job? Ask, do people know where things stand when they work with me? Because in the workplace, clarity is not just communication, clarity is credibility. Well, that's the insight for today. If you found this useful, stick around. And if you need practical HR support for your workplace, my website is linked below. I'll see you in the next one.